Yo, yo, YouTube, what's up? It's your boy, Sports and Fitness Rants. Back with another video for you guys, man. Some good information. Please click that like button. Subscribe to my channel. It helps me, help you. All right, so in this video, I wanted to talk about, some things that I see on people talking about sometimes when you see these debates or you see these conversations that people have. I've seen a lot of people talking about the aspect of the Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls to be specific, and how they were the favorites in the finals. They were always the favorites in the finals, and somehow that benefited the Bulls somehow, that they were the quote unquote favorites, and I don't even know where these people are getting this information from, but if it's, they were the betting favorites in Vegas maybe, or, their friends were picking them to win, or the people on ESPN were picking them to, so they were the favorites. And so, and you see these people talk about that as if, like I said, this was, oh, we're the favorites, so they're supposed to win, which that's going to help them win in reality. And it's kind of weird that because I've never heard that. Like when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s and watching these games, I never really remembered anybody saying, "Oh, well, the Bulls are the favorite, so they're gonna win." It's easy for them; they're the favorites, And yeah, they may have been the favorites some of those times, but not every time, and we'll get into that. So, like I said, so first off, this notion that the Chicago Bulls of the 90s were always the favorites, that's false. They were not always the favorites in every series that they played in. So let's just get that out the way right there. They definitely were not the favorites in every series that they played in. As a matter of fact, you can make an argument that being the favorite most of the time is actually more stressful, right? That's more pressure packed. That puts more pressure on you to be considered the quote unquote favorite, or to have everybody telling you, oh, you guys are going to win this. You know what I'm saying? And then having to go out there and actually perform and prove it. So there were a couple of years. So let's talk about the Chicago Bulls from, like I said, from 1990 from 1991 up until 1998, right? In that championship era of theirs. Because I'm pretty sure that's what people are talking about when they say, oh, the Bulls were the favorites, the Bulls were the favorites. All right, so let's think about what it means to be a quote unquote favorite, right? All that's really, like I said, are we going by Vegas? Are we going by, the newspapers? Are we going by social media? I guess back in those times there was no social media, but are we going by what the papers were saying? Are we going by Vegas? I'm assuming that people are talking about Vegas when they're talking about the favorites. I'm assuming that they're talking about Vegas. So when we're talking about betting odds and how Vegas, does these things, it's all about money, right? It's all about money and odds. So, they're going to put the favorite on, whichever, team or person or, whatever the event is. They're going to put the favorite on who's the betting favorite. The betting odds are right? So if the odds are greater for, such and such, then they'll be the quote-unquote favorite. But when you're talking about betting odds and quote-unquote favorites, it really, when you think about how it pertains to the Chicago Bulls, the reason that the Bulls were the favorites, or they were considered the favorites in most of their playoff series, in most of the finals that they were in, was because of Michael Jordan. Vegas was not going to bet against Jordan. That's basically what it comes down to, guys. That's really what it comes down to. Vegas knew better. Because if you think about the Bulls in previous years, right? Previous editions of the Bulls, we're talking about the late 80s, right? Before they went on to their dynasty. Jordan had made it a point, and the Bulls had made it a point to upset certain teams in the playoffs, when they weren't the favorites in that series. And obviously what I'm talking about is that series against Cleveland when Jordan hit the shot, right? So you're talking about that series. The Cavaliers were the higher seeded team. The Cavaliers were the quote unquote favorite in that series. And why were they the favorite? Because they were the better team, right? Now, Michael Jordan was still up and coming at that time. He was a superstar in the league, but obviously the Bulls hadn't won anything, and the Bulls weren't, considered, next up. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the Cleveland Cavaliers of the late 80s were supposed to be the next up team in the Eastern Conference. It was supposed to be after the Detroit Pistons. The Cleveland Cavaliers were supposed to be next up in that late 80s. The Bulls obviously had other plans for that, and that was the shot pretty much ended the Cleveland Cavaliers' rise to become that next up team. With that shot, everyone had picked against the Bulls in that series. Every beat writer, I can't speak to quote unquote Vegas or whatever, but everybody was picking the Bulls to lose that series. And the Bulls pulled it out. And Jordan hit that incredible shot. And that's pretty much the beginning of his trajectory to becoming legendary with that shot. Now, obviously, before that shot, he had the 63 points in the Garden, which kind of, put him on the map. But when he hit that shot with that kind of, which led them to win a playoff series, that's when he started becoming associated with winning and coming associated with clutchness. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, about where Vegas picks. They were not going to pick again. They won't make that mistake again. And they never made that mistake again. The Bulls were upsetting teams in the late 80s that they weren't supposed to be beating. Like I said, they weren't supposed to be beating those Cavaliers teams, and they weren't supposed to be the next up team. And they weren't supposed to be pushing the Pistons the way they were pushing the Pistons. But everybody saw the greatness of Michael Jordan. So when it finally came time for the Bulls to ascend to that next level, people were not going to pick against them. But we're gonna look into this now a little bit more in detail, and I'll explain to you a couple of times that the Bulls were not the favorites, and they still managed to win. So now in 1991, the Bulls played the Lakers in the finals, and if you remember that series, I was 11 years old, right? So I wasn't, a grown-up, in that series. But I do remember watching that series, and I've rewatched that series over and over and over again because it's one of my favorite Michael Jordan the finals that he played in. Not only because of because he was younger, you know what I'm saying, and the flash and everything was there or whatever, and the dunking, but the amount of assists that he was dropping out in that finals, the dimes that he was dropping in that finals, man. I mean, still to this day, there's been no other player other than a point guard to average that many assists in the finals. Michael Jordan averaged over 11 assists in that finals, but no one really ever talks about that. It just gets kind of like lost in all of his greatness, is that finals performance. But anyway, in that 91 finals, a lot of people were picking the Lakers to beat the Bulls. Now, why is that? The people were picking the Lakers to beat the Bulls based off experience. This was the Bulls' first times in the finals, right? The Lakers had been there. Some of the players on that Lakers team, they'd been there many times before. Obviously, Magic Johnson had been there many times before. Byron Scott had been there before. James Worthy had been there before. So you had some guys on that team that had experience or whatever. A lot of people try to downplay that Lakers team as not being that great. And yeah, it's not, the greatest team in the Lakers dynasties of the 80s and, even the Lakers teams before that. But that team was very good. That team beat the Portland Trailblazers in the Western Conference Finals. And the Portland Trailblazers were the number one team that year. So the Lakers upset the number one team in the Western Conference Finals. And this is a Portland Trailblazers team that doesn't really get a lot of credit. I'm going to make a video about them in the next couple of days here. But that Portland Trailblazers team had been to the finals in 1990, the year before. They were in the Western Conference Finals for 3 consecutive years. And then obviously they were in the finals again in 1992. The Lakers beat that team. And that team, like I said, was a very good team. So coming into that series, a lot of people were picking the Lakers to beat the Bulls. And it only solidified that after game 1. Because what happened in game 1? the Lakers beat the Bulls on their home court. So that kind of led a lot of people to be like, see, we told you the Lakers experience was going to be too much for the Bulls. And a lot of people were still doubting Michael Jordan as not being able to get over that hump. Yeah, he was a great player, he was a great scorer, but a lot of people just chalked it up to that. That was it. It wasn't going to amount to wins. It definitely wasn't going to amount to championships. So that was right. That's 1 year right there. 1991, the finals. Like I said, the Bulls were not the favorite that year. They were not. Another year that the Bulls were not the favorite that I can just off the top of my head thinking back was 1993 Eastern Conference Finals against the New York Knicks. The Bulls were not the number one seed that year. The Knicks were the number one seed in the Eastern Conference that year. And they had home court advantage against the Bulls in the Eastern Conference Finals that year. And anybody that remembers that 93 season or that 93 conference finals will tell you that the Bulls were in trouble. They were in trouble, man. They were down 0-2. Now, granted, both of those games were on the road in New York or whatever, but they lost both games. I had never seen a Michael Jordan-led team lose the first two games like that. And you had never seen that before. So after those first two games, people were writing the Bulls off, man. It was over for the Bulls. But like I said, before that series, a lot of people picked the Knicks to win that series because they believed the Knicks were the better team. Like I said, the Knicks were the number one seed that year in the Eastern Conference. They had a better record than the Bulls. Now, granted, you know, the Bulls were in the third year of a three-peat, right? Or they were going into that third year as back-to-back champions. So when you're a back-to-back champion, you know that Bulls team in 93, I don't think was as great as some of the other teams previously, like a 91 or a 92. They weren't as deep, that 93 team, and it took a toll on them during the regular season, where Jordan basically him and Pippen had to carry a lot of the offensive load in those teams. They didn't really have any offensive firepower like that. They didn't have any playmakers. So that team in 93, like I said, wasn't as good as the previous two teams, I in my opinion, I thought. So that made the Knicks kind of catch them, if you want to say, during the regular season and surpass their win total, which put them in the number one position, gave them home court advantage. So that 93 Eastern Conference Finals, like I said, the Bulls were not the favorite. Now, like I said, are we going by favorite from Vegas or are we going favorite from, sports shows or newspapers? Because like I said, a lot of people in the media were picking the Knicks. I can't speak to whether or not Vegas had the Bulls winning that series or not or whatever, or if they were the favorites going in. Because like I said, Vegas was smart. They knew not to pick against Michael Jordan, right? So that's the common theme here with Vegas and when it pertains to the Bulls being the quote-unquote favorites or whatever. So that's 91 and 93. You could also make an argument in 97, the Bulls were not the favorites in the finals of 1997. Everybody remembers the flu game, but what a lot of people don't remember is that was Game 5, and the series was tied 2 games apiece. The Bulls weren't up, 3-0 or 3-1 or anything like that when that flu game happened. The Bulls were in a tough spot because if anybody remembers, back in the day, the finals used to go 2-3-2, which meant that if you had home court advantage, it didn't matter as much as it does now, because all it took was you to lose one game and you were in a world of trouble, especially if you were playing against a team that had a significant home court edge, like a Utah Jazz. I know a lot of people don't remember maybe if you weren't around, but back in the day, those Utah Jazz, that home court was crazy. It used to get super loud in there. Those fans were nuts, man. They used to heckle people. It was crazy in there. It was one of those things where they had a very good home court advantage. They had a very good home court crowd. And the Bulls had to go and play 3 games in a row in Utah. And they had lost the 2 previous games in Utah. So going into Game 5, which was the 3rd consecutive game in Utah, Michael Jordan wasn't feeling good. Now, we all know, we could say, whether you want to call it a flu or, food poisoning, or he just wasn't feeling, whatever the case may be. The dude was under the weather. You can clearly see it in his eyes. You can clearly see it in his demeanor, the way he carried himself on the court. He did not move around like Michael Jordan normally did. So there was definitely something wrong with him. So that game was a lot bigger than a lot of people, I think, really give it credit for. When they talk about the flu game, they just talk about his heroic effort in that win. But a lot of times people don't mention that it was a game 5 when the series was tied 2-2. And it was in Utah, on the road, man. Like I said, that's a huge, huge win for the Bulls. So, when you think about things like that, the Bulls weren't necessarily the favorites of that year. There were a lot of people picking Utah to beat the Bulls because Utah was so good, and they were so such, like I said, such a well coached team. Jerry Sloan doesn't get a lot of credit as an all-time great coach. You don't really hear his name brought up a lot of times, but he was an all-time great coach. May he rest in peace. And that team was a very good team. They just had good team role players like the Bulls did. Everybody knew their role. And then you had, of course, the two leaders in Stockton and Malone leading the charge. So we talked about 91. We talked about the Eastern Conference Finals in 93. We talked about 1997 Finals. We can even go to the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals against the Indiana Pacers. And if you recall in The Last Dance documentary, Reggie Miller himself said that he 100% believed that they were going to beat the Bulls that year in the Eastern Conference Finals. They believed that. The Bulls were old. They were the oldest team in the league that year. Michael Jordan was on fumes, man. He was running on fumes. Pippen had missed like 70% of the season or 50% of the season or something like that. He missed like, 40 games. I don't remember with the, with the delayed, off-season surgery. It was just one of those crazy seasons, man. Rodman was having one of his crazy, mind seasons. The Bulls were, like I said, the Bulls were just crawling to the finish line there, man. And a lot of people thought that the Pacers were gonna beat the Bulls. That they just had them, that year. It was their year. The Bulls were it was at the end of their ride. The Bulls, listen, for all intents and purposes, people, the Bulls had no business winning that 1998 championship. They had no business winning that. And that's what's crazy about it. When you hear people talk about the Bulls being the favorites and all these things, and the Bulls were never the underdogs and stuff like that, it's crazy when you think about that. They had no business winning that 1998 finals. Not in the condition that they were in. Not that the way the team was falling apart physically and mentally. They were just drained, man, with all the drama going on in the head office, and the coach was going to be gone. I mean, just think about everything. They had no business winning that. But the mental fortitude of the Chicago Bulls, led by their leader, Michael Jordan, who instilled that mental fortitude in them. I made a video about this a couple of days ago, talking about how Michael Jordan built a dynasty at practice through attrition, right? He built it up through attrition, which is what the military does to train its special forces and train soldiers and stuff like that. They use attrition. They use what's called, they put your feet to the fire, right? And either you can pass it or you can't. And if you can't, you're gone. There's no crying. There's no excuses. You just didn't make the cut. It doesn't matter. You could have broke a leg or whatever. You didn't make it. That's how Jordan put his team through the rigors in practice. Either you were going to deal with his craziness, you were going to deal with him berating you, or you were going to be gone, or you weren't going to make it. That's just the way it was. And it worked. It worked for them, and it worked for him. And that's why the Bulls won that 1998 championship. It was mental toughness. Had nothing to do with they were a better team than those other teams or they were more talented. No, they had Michael Jordan and they had the mental toughness that he instilled in them that they all were able to get through. So give all those guys credit, like I said, for dealing with that and being mentally strong enough to overcome those odds in 1998. So now I've already talked about a couple of years that the Bulls weren't quote unquote the favorites, or it didn't seem like they were the favorites, or it didn't feel like they were the favorites in a lot of people's eyes. Now Vegas, like I said, Vegas maybe might have picked them, but I already talked to you about that and why that was. To this day, I guarantee you, if there was any kind of quote-unquote bet in Vegas and Michael Jordan is involved in it personally, like for example, let's say if they were like 10 shots from anywhere on the court, or 10 shots anywhere on the court, Michael Jordan, against whoever, I guarantee you the favorite would be Michael Jordan. I guarantee it. He'll be the favorite. I wouldn't bet against him. Would you bet against Michael Jordan? I wouldn't bet against Michael Jordan. That's what he has instilled in us. Michael Jordan, he earned that by playing the way he played and acting the way that he acted in such a the way that he did. He made people believe in him, regardless of whatever the external circumstances were. We believed in Jordan. It didn't matter if you were a fan of his or not. You never bet against him, and you never once thought he's not going to be able to pull this off, or he's not going to make this. Just like whenever he took a shot, whenever Michael Jordan took a shot at the end of a game, whether to win it or tie, whatever it was, people literally held their breath. Look at the photos. Look at the reactions of people in 1998 in Utah. Look at their reactions when you see Michael Jordan hitting that shot and they had that freeze frame of the ball. It's not even in the rim yet. It's in the air. And look at their faces. Everyone in that crowd is holding their breath. They're doing this. They're going like this because they know. They know it's going in. If you would have bet money on that shot, I guarantee you, people in Vegas would have bet, yo, Michael Jordan's going to make that shot. I guarantee you, man. And that's what Michael Jordan was all about. Meanwhile, other players, they would go and take that shot, and it wouldn't be necessarily the same. I'm not saying every player, because there were a lot of clutch players in NBA history. But what Michael Jordan did to people when he would raise up for a shot, people literally were like, it's over. It's done. Look what just happened. You know, he did it to us again. So real quickly, though, I want to talk about something when it comes to underdogs and being the favorite. I played sports my whole life, right? And when I played in high school, we weren't good at basketball. I played basketball, baseball, and football. And we were never good at basketball or baseball or football. We just weren't good. And, you know, we won 3 games, I think. You know, one year we won 2 games, another year out of 8, which is not good. You know, 3-5, 2-6. Those are not good teams. And I remember, you know, always feeling as if every time a team would see us on their schedule, they would be like, oh, that's an easy win. You know what I'm saying? Chalk it up for a W. We're playing, you know, the Rams. You know, they're terrible. That's an easy win for us. And, you know, when you think about being an underdog, you know, why do you think people root for underdogs, right? People root for the underdog. It's the American way almost, because you like to see an underdog, you know, win, right? Because that's what a lot of people in America are. They're underdogs. You know, a lot of these people make it to professional sports, or they make it in, you know, business or whatever your avenue is. And a lot of times these people are underdogs. You know, they're not the favorites to come out, and they're underdogs. And the American people love to root for underdogs. So, and why am I saying this? I'm saying this because when you're an underdog and you're going against, you know, a juggernaut, or you're going against a favorite, let's say a quote unquote favorite, you're playing with house money, right? So when people try to use this excuse or use this knock or try to use a knock as if, you know, being the favorite somehow, you know, handed you the win or gave you these trophies, it's almost laughable. Because I could easily make an argument that being the favorite over and over and over and over and over again is a lot more pressure packed and a lot more harder. It's a lot harder to sustain your greatness or your level of you know, excellence when you are the favorite. Because where's your motivation coming from? You have to internalize that, right? You have to find a deep down inside you, especially after you're winning all the time. I mean, think about this for a second. From a personal standpoint, you know, let's not talk about the Chicago Bulls as a team. Let's just talk about Michael Jordan as a personal, as a person. He basically had to be flawless in his final record for his career to be what it was. If Michael Jordan wasn't 6-0 in the finals, he wouldn't be Michael Jordan. And that's what he was associated with. He was associated with an ultimate winner and ultimate greatness. So when you hear people say, oh man, this guy's, he's like the, you know, the Michael Jordan of race car driving, or he's like the Michael Jordan of pizza delivery boys. You'll hear people associate Michael Jordan's greatness with almost anything. You could be the Michael Jordan of roofers. You could be the Michael Jordan of teachers. You could be the Michael Jordan, you know what I'm saying? How many times have you heard someone say this? Oh man, he's like the Michael Jordan of doctors. He's like the Michael Jordan of this. Because it wasn't about Michael Jordan, you know, just Michael Jordan itself. It was about the greatness and the excellence and the undefeatedness, the 6-0. If Michael Jordan was 6-2, or Michael Jordan was 3-3, or 4-2, or 5-1, even though 5-1 or 4-2 record in the finals is exceptional and great, it would not have been the same. People would not be saying, oh, he's the Michael Jordan of this, because that's what Michael Jordan is associated with. It's the ultimate winner, ultimate in greatness, the ultimate in coming up big when it mattered most. And when you have someone like that on your team, no matter what team you're on, people are going to, favor you. They're going to favor that team because of that person and their mentality and how they raise the level of everybody else mentally and how prepared this person is. That's why the Bulls were considered the favorites. But don't get it twisted and think because you're the favorite that entitled you to walk onto the court and win the games. You have to go out there and win as the quote-unquote favorite when everybody's coming for you and they're the underdogs. So if everybody else is the underdog and you're playing against, that means that they're playing pressure-free. They're playing stress-free. What do they have? They have nothing to lose. So think about that. And that's why being an underdog sometimes is a lot easier than being the favorite. You have nothing to win. You have nothing to worry about. You're playing free, right? You also often hear the phrase, you're playing with house money. Everybody was playing with house money against Jordan because the bottom line was if they didn't beat Michael Jordan, it was okay because it was Michael Jordan. But the flip side could not have been said. If Michael Jordan would have lost to Patrick Ewing, or if Michael Jordan would have lost to Charles Barkley, or if Michael Jordan would have lost to Karl Malone and John Stockton, if Michael Jordan would have lost to Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp, he would not be Michael Jordan, man. All it would have taken was one finals loss. That's all it would have taken, and it would have ruined his greatness, his career, as far as what he was able to attain and that level that he established. He established that excellence. So that was his burden to live up to, right? And it was not an easy burden to live up to. But he was able to live up to that standard. So when people try to gloss over the 6-0 record as like, oh, that's all you got to say is 6-0. It's not about just being the 6-0. It's about what it took to get to that level, what it means to be undefeated. Like I said, to be the favorite, to be the underdog sometimes, to be the favorite most of the time and have to perform when people are expecting you to perform. He never had a choke job. Everybody was expecting him to put up 30, 35, 40 points a game, and the man went out and did that. Everybody expected him to be an elite two-way player, and the man went out and did that every single season. That's not easy to do. He didn't have an off year. He didn't have one year in the finals where he was, bad or, he missed a lot of shots or he couldn't pull through at the end. The man was consistent. And that's what you have to understand when you're talking about favorites and underdogs. There's a huge difference there. So thanks for watching my video. I know it was a little bit long-winded or whatever, but we had to get into some of these details here and explain some of this stuff about being the favorite and being the underdog. Please like my video. Please subscribe, guys. Once again, it's your boy, Sports and Fitness Rants, and y'all be good.